Thanks, Bauer, for joining us. So let's start with what should people keep in mind while investing at times of this high inflation and what impact it has on your investment.
The first and foremost thing that people should keep in mind while investing is that their investment should be able to earn more than the inflation rate. If you are saving for retirement and you have aimed for an inflation rate of around 6%, but inflation is growing at 7%, you will obviously fall short. Now, if inflation is 7% and your investments are earning 6% or even less than that, at 5%, then obviously you will fall short and not be able to meet your goals.
Okay, so gold has been hedge against inflation, and Indian people keep a record amount of gold with themselves. Do you think it's a safe bet and a cushion right now?
Gold used to be seen as a hedge against inflation traditionally, but in the past few years it has lost that position. It is no longer a hedge against inflation. We've seen in the past few years only, gold prices have gone up by around 5.5%, whereas in the past 10 years, the inflation rate has been around, consumer inflation rate has been around 5.78%. So if you invested in gold, yes, the prices may have gone up, but on an inflation adjusted basis, it is below what it used to be 10 years ago.
Okay, many in my family, they have this belief that once you are done with your retirement, you get a big amount and you can actually live off the saving interest rate or the FDs that you have put in. Do you think these are going to be impacted?
Well, FDs is a very safe investment and a lot of people in India are FD investors. But FDs will not be able to beat inflation for the simple reason that the interest rate on FDs is lower than what inflation rate is right now. Even if it was as much as the inflation rate, say 7%, the tax impact on the FD, because FD income is fully taxable. In the 30% bracket, a 7% FD is actually giving you less than 5% on a post-tax basis. So it will never be able to beat inflation.
Oh, so what about the saving account, the amount that huge amounts that are kept in saving bank account and lockers?
Savings bank account will give you around 3%. And that too is taxable after a 10,000 rupee exemption is there. Yes, but there the money is losing value faster than it is in FDs and in gold. Why? Because if it's giving you only 3%, now this, if you have 1 lakh in your bank account, after a year that money will be around 1,03,000.
Okay.
But the purchasing power of that money is lower than what it used to be a year back because inflation is at 7%. So something worth 1 lakh is now worth 1,07,000 in the market, and you have just 1,03,000. So obviously it is losing money.
So basically you have lost 4,000.
Yes.
Okay. So to understand inflation, we need to talk a bit about CPI and WPI, right? And how exactly it impacts us. There are two types of inflation. So which one impacts us more?
Well, the WPI is the headline inflation and the wholesale inflation may not be impacting you as an individual as much as the consumer inflation does. Even in the consumer inflation, inflation is the impact of inflation is very personal. Okay. And it applies to an individual's consumption basket. If you are buying more expensive things and if you're buying imported stuff, a lot of imported stuff in your normal consumption, then obviously your inflation will be higher than that of a person who is not indulging in all these expenses.
And I'm guessing the falling rupee is also making the matter worse.
Yes, if you have imported stuff in your consumption basket, obviously it will cost you more.
What role does tax has to play in your inflation calculation?
See, a tax, as I told you earlier, that tax, some investments are taxed at a very high rate, that is FDs, RDs, bonds. Some are actually tax-free, like PPF. But there are limits in PPF, how much you can invest in PPF. Some investments like equity-oriented investments, have an exemption of up to 1 lakh rupees for long-term gains. For short-term gains, they tax 15%. So there are different rates for different asset classes.
So, Babar, it seems there is no way that we can escape the inflation, but there must be some things through which we can cushion our investment from this inflation.
Yes, of course. Now, obviously, equity investments, the historical data suggests that equity investments have always been able to beat inflation in the long term. Okay. But yes, you can't obviously have totally equity exposure in your portfolio. What is required is that you have a diversified portfolio that includes all types of assets, including fixed income assets like PPF, which is a tax-free. At tax-free 7.1%, it is giving you a very good inflation-beating return. Not inflation beating, but at least inflation reaching in. Okay. Then there are other things like your PF, your NPS, have some in your FDs also. I'm not saying completely stay away from FDs, but have a diversified portfolio which puts around 30-40% in fixed income, 30-40% in equity oriented instruments, say 10% in gold, 10% in property. How do you put small amounts in property? Now there are instruments like REITs where you can put small amounts in equity also, and you can gain from the profit. So have a diversified portfolio. It will always give you better inflation adjusted returns.
And when we are talking about gold, we're not talking about the jewelry. Invest in it's ETF or gold bullions, right?
You can invest in ETFs also. ETFs is a easier and much better way to invest in gold. There are also sovereign gold bonds which give you higher returns, which are also linked to the price of gold, but give you an extra interest every year. So that gives you slightly higher returns than an ETF will.
Thanks, Babar, for explaining these things so in simple terms. So you can actually cushion your investments from inflation if you follow these steps. Please tell us, did you like this video? If you have any suggestion, please write that in the comment section. Thanks for watching.